A journey by train through the fog. The train gently pulled away from the platform, as if reluctant to leave the warm glow of the station lights behind. I settled by the window, resting my hand on the armrest, watching as the lamps and signs slowly drifted past. Somewhere nearby, a compartment door slammed shut. I heard someone laugh, caught a faint whiff of freshly baked bread from a paper bag carried by a passing passenger. The train picked up speed, and soon there was nothing outside but a dense grey fog, swallowing the last traces of the station. The train gently pulled away from the platform, as if reluctant to leave the warm glow of the station lights behind. I settled by the window, resting my hand on the armrest, watching as the lamps and signs slowly drifted past. Somewhere nearby, a compartment door slammed shut. I heard someone laugh, caught a faint whiff of freshly baked bread from a paper bag carried by a passing passenger. The train picked up speed, and soon there was nothing outside but a dense grey fog, swallowing the last traces of the station. Watching the rain and the fog. The rain still fell in a lazy drizzle. Droplets merged into tiny streams on the window, like little travelers racing each other down the glass. I've always loved traveling in the rain. As a child, on family trips down south, I'd press my forehead to the cool glass and watch forests and tiny stations rush by. I remember one old, half-ruined station. There were dim orange lanterns there. They glowed so faintly, almost tired, yet somehow warmer than the bright white lights we have today. You know, it's easier to think about the important things when you're on a train. The train moves forward, and you feel as though you're being carried into the future, leaving everything unnecessary behind. How often do we cling to things we should have let go long ago? People, dreams, old habits. Sometimes I wish these tracks would lead not just to another city, but to a completely different life. Short pause, just the sound of rain and wheels. But perhaps that's the whole point, the journey itself. The idea that while the train keeps going, you still have time to think, to breathe, to smile at a stranger passing by. The train slowed, and through the fog, I saw the faint lights of another small station. On the platform stood a man in a long coat and a woman holding a child wrapped in a bright scarf. When the doors opened, cool air rushed in, carrying the scent of wet earth and machine oil. A handful of new passengers climbed aboard, arranging their bags. Short greetings, the rustle of jackets, the creak of suitcases being lifted. Someone opened a book right away, another shut their eyes and sank into a pillow. And then the train jolted once more, carrying us all deeper into the rain and night. I always wonder where everyone else might be going. Maybe that elderly couple is off to visit their grandchildren in a little seaside town. Maybe that young guy with the headphones is on his way to see a girlfriend he hasn't met in a year. Trains tie fates together, even if only for a moment. And then, one by one, People step off at their stops, leaving just a faint memory of a silhouette by the window. My eyes grow heavy. The rain becomes a soft melody. The rhythmic wheels a quiet lullaby. I dream that I'm on another train, an old one with wooden benches. Outside there aren't forests, but endless seas, and we're racing along tracks laid right over the water. Now and then lanterns appear along the way, their glow reflected in the waves like tiny golden islands. I want to reach out the window and touch the water, but the train carries me on. Somewhere ahead it's starting to lighten. Not quite dawn, but the fog has turned silver instead of grey. The train rolls on, but in that new light there's a promise of another day. Maybe when we arrive, the rain will have stopped, and the streets will smell fresh and clean. Maybe I'll find a small cafe with wooden tables and hot chocolate. But for now, let the train carry me farther. Let the clatter of the wheels soothe me, and the fog hide everything that's unimportant. A rainy afternoon at the cafe. The rain had been falling since morning, slow and steady, draping the whole city in a gentle grey hush. I walked aimlessly for a while, letting the drizzle soak into my coat, until I found myself standing outside a small cafe on a quiet street. The sign above the door swayed slightly in the wind, its paint chipped but charming. Through the fogged-up windows, I could see warm yellow lights and silhouettes moving lazily inside. I pushed the door open, and a little bell jingled overhead, a soft, welcoming sound. The scent of fresh pastries and roasted coffee wrapped around me like a blanket. I chose a table by the window. The glass was cool under my fingertips, tiny droplets racing each other down its surface. The cafe was far from full. At the corner, a man in a wool sweater typed something on his laptop, occasionally pausing to stare into his coffee as if hoping it would answer some unspoken question. Near the counter, two friends laughed over tiny cups of espresso, their hands moving animatedly as they told stories I could only guess at. I let my coat slip off the chair, leaned back, and listened. The barista behind the counter moved with practiced ease, a graceful rhythm of grinding, tamping, steaming. Each little action punctuated by the soft hiss of milk frothing or the gentle knock of a portafilter against metal. I wondered how many thousands of cups had been poured here. How many first dates had started nervously over cappuccinos? How many breakups whispered over half-empty mugs, hands twisting napkins into fragile shapes? It's strange how cafes become witnesses to our most human moments. Joy, heartbreak, mundane routine, all brewed together under the same soft lighting. outside, the rain blurred everything, the parked cars, the neon pharmacy sign across the street, even the faces of people hurrying by under umbrellas. It felt like the world had melted slightly, colors running together into a watercolor painting. Inside, though, time seemed to slow. I took a sip of my drink, warm, slightly bitter, with just a hint of cinnamon. Let it sit on my tongue, let it remind me that right now, nothing needed fixing or chasing. Maybe that's why we come to places like this. Not just for coffee, but to find a small pocket of peace where clocks tick a little more kindly. A young couple appeared out of the rain, laughing as they tried to fold up a stubborn umbrella. She playfully slapped his shoulder. He bowed dramatically as if apologizing for the weather itself. They ducked inside, cheeks flushed pink from the cold, eyes bright. Their joy was infectious. I couldn't help but smile, even though they never noticed me. Moments later, a delivery cyclist zipped past, splashing through a puddle, cursing under his breath, then disappearing around the corner. Life kept flowing, whether or not I paid attention, but just then, I was happy to sit here and watch it all play out like a quiet film. As the cafe filled with more customers, a gentle murmur rose, conversations overlapping, blending into a soft, comforting noise. Somewhere a chair scraped against tile, a teaspoon clinked against porcelain. My thoughts wandered back to old afternoons. A rainy day years ago, sitting across from someone I once loved. We shared a slice of cake, talked about traveling together, laughed over nothing at all. I wondered where they were now, if they ever stepped into small cafes on rainy days and thought of me. Eventually, the rain outside softened to a mere whisper against the glass. Light broke through the clouds, catching in little droplets on the window pane, turning them into tiny prisms. I finished the last of my coffee, savoring the lingering warmth. Around me, life went on, orders called out, doors opening and closing, the world continuing its quiet spin. And for a moment, everything felt perfectly enough. No rushing, no searching. Just a rainy afternoon, a good cup of coffee, and a heart that, despite everything, still found wonder in the small things. Rain in the forest. A gentle rain caught me in the forest quite unexpectedly. At first, it was just a few lazy drops slipping through the canopy, tapping softly on the leaves before vanishing into the moss at my feet. I stopped, tilted my face up toward the sky, and closed my eyes. Cool droplets landed on my cheeks and forehead, surprisingly tender, almost like small, fleeting kisses. Gradually, the rain thickened. Now whole streams of water slid down the leaves, gathered into heavy droplets, and fell with a delicate thud to the ground below. The forest stirred to life in its own way. Somewhere close by, a hedgehog or perhaps a mouse rustled about, hurrying to hide under twisted roots. Branches, weighed down by moisture, bent slightly, shaking off their burdens onto the ferns below. The air filled with a special fragrance you only find in the forest after rain, damp earth, pine resin, soaked leaves. It was so rich and thick that I wanted to breathe it in deeper, letting every subtle note sink in. Off in the distance, a few birds called to each other cautiously, as if testing whether this quiet, dripping world was still safe. I walked slowly, not in any rush to seek shelter. There was something strangely cleansing about letting the rain fall, feeling it trickle through my hair, across my hands, down my shoulders. In the city, we always run from the rain, open umbrellas, dive under awnings. But here, in the forest, it seemed this was exactly how it should be, to walk beneath the rain as part of the forest itself. Soon I found a large tree with a broad canopy. Underneath, the rain was gentler, whispering softly through the leaves above. I sat down on a fallen log and simply listened. To the rhythmic fall of droplets nearby. To the way, farther off, water gathered into a thin stream and murmured between roots. To the forest living even in the rain, just slower, more cautiously. I didn't know how long I sat there. My thoughts drifted lazily, as if they too had become water, clear, calm. Memories of childhood floated up, of running barefoot through puddles with friends after a heavy rain, laughing so loudly it felt like the whole world must hear us. Here, in the forest, those memories felt especially vivid, as if the rain had washed off years of dust. Slowly, the rain began to quiet, drops falling less frequently. Somewhere nearby, a titmouse landed on a branch, shook out its wings, scattering tiny droplets all around. In the bushes behind me, something rustled, perhaps a cautious hare stepping back onto the path. The forest filled with life again, but it was no longer the busy chatter of morning. This was a gentle, damp evening calm. When the rain had almost stopped, I rose and continued on. The ground squished softly beneath my feet, small puddles glimmered here and there, reflecting pieces of sky peeking through the leaves. Every step felt especially real, especially heard. As if the forest was listening to me walk and quietly making room, allowing me deeper into its heart. At the edge of the forest, I stepped out under the open sky. Up above, the clouds were beginning to break apart, sending down shafts of golden light. Those rays fell on the wet grass, bursting into thousands of tiny sparks, as though someone had scattered small jewels all across the forest floor. I smiled at the sight and thought, how glad I am that I didn't run from the rain. I glanced back into the dark, damp cool of the forest and almost heard it whisper, "Come back again. I'll always be here." And with that gentle, certain promise, I headed home, quietly, almost like the rain itself. Street musicians and the warmth of home. The city was getting ready to sleep. Street lamps had long lit up their little suns, stretching long golden shadows across the empty streets. And we were walking side by side, breathing in the air filled with coolness, the scent of fresh asphalt after a recent rain, and flowering bushes someone had carefully planted along the sidewalks. You squeezed my hand a bit tighter, as if you were afraid of getting lost in this quiet nighttime fairy tale. I smiled and pulled you closer, feeling your elbow lightly brush against my side, and a soft warmth spread through my chest. Suddenly, around the corner, where the street led us out to a small square, we heard music. At first, barely noticeable, like a dream. Then louder and clearer, a saxophone, a guitar, and a quiet voice singing something in Italian. 3 musicians were sitting right there on an old stone bench. They had an open case for coins, and a few passers-by had stopped to listen. You immediately froze, grabbed my hand and whispered, "Let's stay here for a while." So we did. For a long time, in silence. We listened to the melody slowly flowing around us. It felt so alive, so real, as if someone was gently pulling memories out of us, memories of warm sunsets, of walks along the riverbank, of childhood dreams and first confessions of love. The musicians exchanged glances and smiled. They were playing for us, for the city, for this very night. You rested your head on my shoulder, and I could feel your breathing a little faster than usual. Then you suddenly said, "It feels like, in moments like this, we become part of something bigger." And I nodded. Because there was no need to look for words. Everything was already there in these chords, in your fingers clutching my hand, in the soft glow of the streetlights on your hair. When the music faded, you walked over and dropped a few bills into the case. One of the musicians looked up, winked, and quietly said, "Take care of each other." And somehow, it sounded more important than any song. We walked on, slowly, as if afraid to scare away the magic still floating around us. The city murmured gently. Somewhere a car drove by, someone laughed on the veranda of a cafe. On a balcony across the street a light was burning, and a shadow that looked like a woman with a glass of wine stretched out toward the summer sky. You softly hummed the tune that had just been played, and I thought once again how impossibly much I loved you. And then we came home. That very home where 2 mugs with leftover tea were waiting on the kitchen table, a cozy blanket carelessly thrown on the couch, and our favorite cat who stretched out to greet us with a disgruntled look. "Where have you 2 been so long?" You immediately slipped off your sandals, sighed and said, "It's so nice to come back to our little world." I went to the kitchen, turned on the kettle, and you sat on the high stool by the table, tucking your legs under you, watching me as if we were here for the very first time. Your eyes were glowing with the same golden light as the street lamps outside. We sat in the kitchen, drank tea, reminisced about the music, the square, that saxophonist who winked at you at the most tender moment of the song. You told me you imagined how one day would go to Rome, sit in a little street cafe and listen to musicians just like them, different, yet somehow still kindred spirits. Then we moved to the living room. You stretched out on the couch so that your legs ended up on my lap. I started to slowly massage them, and you closed your eyes with a pleased little smile. An old movie was playing on the TV screen, but neither of us was really watching. We were just together, in this room, in this life, in this peaceful night of ours. You dozed off, and I sat there looking at you, thinking how the street music could weave its way into our everyday life and leave a warm, gentle echo behind. And it seemed to me that even when all the melodies fell silent, the way you looked right then, so sleepy, so peaceful, would remain the most important song I'd ever hear. And you know, all of this, it's our simple, genuine love. The nighttime walks, the music on the street corner, and then tea in our kitchen, the cat, the blanket, and your feet resting on my lap. Maybe happiness really is in these little things. And if that's true, then we have a whole universe of it. A bedtime story, childhood, summer, and warm courtyards. If you close your eyes and listen closely, you might still hear it. Somewhere far away, right at the heart of summer. The voices of children ringing out. The creak of swings in the yard. The wind hiding in the leaves. Somewhere, an old door on a neighbor's porch sways on rusty hinges, tapping gently, as if in time with the world's quiet breath. Sometimes I think childhood never really left. It just hid itself. In the shadows of old courtyards, in sunlit reflections on puddles after rain, in the rough bark of trees where we once carved our first shy declarations of love. And if you just stand still for a moment, half close your eyes, it all comes back, like a soft, warm wave, washing over you, carrying you right back to when everything was simple. I remember those yards where we spent entire summers. We didn't care if our clothes got dirty with dust and sand, or if our legs were always scraped and covered in little bruises. We could spend all day playing tag, building forts out of old blankets and sticks, sneaking sugar from home to host our own tea parties on the crumbling bricks by the garages. In the evenings, the courtyard would fill with the smell of fried potatoes, freshly cut grass, and damp concrete cooling down after a hot day. We'd sit right there on the ground, drawing secret symbols in the dust with little sticks, sharing our dreams with each other. Someone wanted to be an astronaut. Someone an artist. Someone simply said, "When I grow up, I'll have a big dog and a house with a swing." And it seemed so important then that your heart would squeeze tight with joy and hope. I remember one evening, all of us sitting together, watching the sunset. The sun slowly slipped behind the rooftops, the sky turned pink and lilac, and we were all silent. Maybe for the first time that summer, we understood we were sharing something big and real. That these exact moments, when nobody was arguing or teasing, just sitting close by, would be the ones we'd remember for the rest of our lives. Sometimes I wonder, where are all those kids now? Maybe someone lives in another city. Maybe someone works in an office. Maybe someone's on the other side of the world. But in my memory, they're all still there, running through the yard, laughing, bumping shoulders, racing to see who can reach the old iron slide first. And I'm there too. Small, barefoot, sunlit hair, eyes shining with pure happiness. Then I open my eyes and come back here, to this room, this night. I hear the wind rustling through the leaves outside the window, the soft creak of the wooden windowsill. And I realize childhood is still close by. It just moved inside me, living quietly there, warming me from within, like a tiny lantern that never goes out. And maybe all the most important things in life, we already experienced back then. In those yards, among sandboxes and old swings. And now we just return to those memories. To feel again how light and joyful it was to breathe. When you were 10, and an entire summer stretched out ahead.